Today, we are going after that age-old question in real estate. I'm talking time-long question. Is your first offer your best offer? Today, we're going after the answer, and it really might surprise you. So let's get after it. All right, guys, today we're going after I think this is one of the longest standing adages in real estate, which is your first offer is your best offer. I'm thinking, gosh, we've been at this for 30 years. We keep counting how many years we've been at this, but collectively 60 years. And the reality is that has never died. Like all these decades later, people keep saying, well, your first offer is probably your best offer.
Right.
We want to get after that today. We kind of want to break that down, not just for sellers, because that's really who's sort of hearing that comment, but also maybe a little bit for buyers and the way they want to think about it. So we think about it this way. One critical component is it depends on when that first offer comes in. So let's go after that in terms of the psychology, the mentality associated with the why on that. Why and when is that more true and not?
Well, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, an offer comes in. If you have been on the market for 4 hours and you get an offer, it might be a hard decision.
Yeah.
Why it might be a hard decision? Are there more? Is this how every 4 hours am I going to get another offer?
Right.
Did I underprice it? All this stuff starts going through your head. If you've been on the market for 2-3 months, your first offer, you're pretty excited about it. It's an easy decision. That's probably going to be my best offer.
Yeah. So let's go after the first. Let's go to the first part of that, because the latter, you're right.
Yeah.
I think everybody kind of gets that. Okay, you've been on for 2 months.
Yeah.
You hadn't had an offer. You're tired of being on the market. Maybe you've done a price adjustment. Your point is, even if that first offer, is that going to be your best offer? Well, I think the reality is it's probably the best one to consider because you don't have any others, right? So that's the one to really give some sharp consideration to. What are the challenges with a seller right out of that gate on that first 4-hour offer where it comes in? Like, what's the psychology that stops sellers from thinking that maybe, how could that possibly be a best offer?
Well, they immediately think that, gosh, this is easy. There's plenty of buy. If I got an offer this fast, it's just going to keep rolling in. They might go, well, if I got an offer that fast, did I price it too low?
Yeah.
And then they start wondering, well, if I price it too low, do I have to take the offer? Maybe we should have come to market higher. And it's like a deer in headlights. They don't really know what to do. So it becomes a little challenging right then. It's a pressure point.
It emboldens them too. Like, I get that. If I got my first offer was in 4 hours, we're saying, and all of a sudden I would probably be looking past that buyer through the door and saying, there's got to be more buyers back there. Maybe I've got the best house that the world has ever seen. And so everybody's going to want it. And so you start making some challenging decisions there that might embolden you to think, okay, I got to stick firm to my price. I got to get the best terms. I might even put this buyer on ice a little bit. Maybe I won't take it all that seriously. Those are the risks associated with that.
Yeah, they're risks. You think about it this way. And we've talked about this before, when you first come to market, is that first wave of buyers. Was there some pent up demand out there? Are there buyers waiting for a property like yours to hit the market?
Yeah.
And then when your property hits the market and it matches what they've been looking for, they act quickly, they act decisively, and they tend to come in pretty strong. They tend to come in pretty attractively for a seller. And but that's that first buyer pool. That's that audience that has been waiting for this property to hit the market. The longer it stretches out, what happens? You kind of cycle through that first pool of buyers, and now you're opening the door. Okay, nobody wanted it the first go round. Now we're kind of looking for new people to come into the market and things like that.
For sure. We call that first wave, right? That first wave, the ready, willing, eager, able, decisive, knowledgeable, ready to rock and roll buyer is a great buyer. That's sometimes why this comes to root, is like, that's probably the buyer you really want, because the intent, we talk about that a lot, is super, super clear. They're acting on this right away because they've already evaluated all other properties. They've been waiting for this one to come on the market. That's why they're there inside 4 hours. They're a good buyer to have at the table. You don't necessarily want to kick them away thinking that in you certainly wouldn't think in the second wave of buyers that same quality buyer is necessarily going to be there with the same eagerness, readiness, willingness, knowledge, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And that's the challenge. So conversely, if you take a seller who says, okay, you know what? Now I think there's a lot more buyers lined up.
Mm-hmm.
What's the downside that we oftentimes see with a seller that maybe doesn't make that best first offer work? And now they're waiting, okay, bring on the next buyers. Like what ends up being the downside?
Well, that first offer, I think it kind of becomes the benchmark in their head.
Sure.
Okay, so if I'm selling my house and the first offer comes in and it's X, then I'm thinking, okay, I'm waiting for something a little bit better, right? But I know at least I got X. That's a safe bet,
That's a
right?
guarantee.
So, but that benchmark then can also be a challenge down the road. So if you got that first offer that didn't work out for whatever reason, either you didn't come to terms or whatever, but you have in your mind that my property is at least worth that because I've already got an offer. And then a month or 2 months go by, your next offer comes in less.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute. And so it becomes really challenging. Then you got the carrying cost, the taxes, insurance, things like that of home ownership during those 2 months or however long that you kind of have to build into the equation.
For sure.
And then the other thing to think about is the longer you're sitting there on the market, if it's your primary residence or whatever, I mean, every time you have a showing, it's just uncomfortable maybe to have to turn on all the lights and leave for a couple hours and have somebody come into your home. And wouldn't that be nicer if that just kind of happened early on and it was over? So you got to deal with all that.
I think most people want that. I think most people want to be solved early, but they want to make sure that they have been solved at the best price that they can possibly get. Sure. And it's hard. That one that got away is hard. And we see that sometimes even just a couple weeks later where the deal didn't work out. The sellers maybe stuck to their terms a little bit too strong. They figure there's other people coming. They don't show up, or maybe they don't show up as strong, or the offers aren't quite to that benchmark. And we find them asking, like, how do we claw that buyer back?
Sure.
And sometimes it's like, that's the one that got away. They bought the house down the street. That was their number 2 choice. They couldn't work it out with you. They moved on to somebody else. And that's the challenge sometimes with extra time on the market further down the road is your days on market builds. Mm-hmm. The competing inventory might build. And we talk about this too. Your reputation is growing. Yeah. So there's that house that, it didn't sell on day 1. It's sold. It's still out there day 60, day 75, day 100, whatever the case is.
Yeah. And this concept is also supported by data. I mean, if you look at the sale price to list price ratio,
right,
and you look at the sale price to list price ratio for properties that transact, let's say in the first 2 or 3 weeks, and you compare that to the sale price to list price ratio of properties that transact 3, 4, 5 months down the road, you're going to be tighter to your sale price typically the earlier you are, then the further down the road you end up selling. And a lot of times that statistic though gets skewed because what happens in those 2, 3, 4 months, they might drop the price.
Right.
So you really have to compare sale price to list price ratio early on versus sale price to original list price ratio for properties that transact down the road.
Because it could be an even bigger gap.
Oh, a much bigger gap. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so I think on the buyer side is, if you are that buyer that's 4 hours in, yes, you do kind of have to put your seller hat on a little bit, get inside this psychology, understand it a little bit more. So much of what we do is psychology, right? It's so emotional and trying to figure it out. And to consider making sure that you make a good, strong offer. It gets within the bounds of what you think is reasonable, et cetera. Try to hit the hot buttons with the seller. Say, well, but I'm also willing to do X, Y, or Z, because you really want them to get into that modality of, oh, the first offer is my best offer. How do you get the seller to believe that, to think that, without necessarily giving away all that you've got to give in an offer? I think that's really important for buyers to have that mentality when they're thinking about it. Because again, if you come at it early, which is the right time to do it, because you're ready, willing, able, eager, and all that kind of stuff, you might find a seller who resists. So you're going to have to do some communicating, maybe even some narrative about your interest, maybe even give them a little bit of extra time to think about that offer, so they can see, are there really going to be other people that show up behind me that are going to perform as well? So it's a little bit of a dance.
Yeah, communication is so helpful in that situation. What we tend to see happen early on a listing is the buyer's agent, if we're listing a property and we've only been on the market for a few hours or a few days, the questions that come to us might be, what's most important for your seller?
Right.
Is it when they close? When would they like to close? Is it price? Is it what is it that's really important? Those questions come in when we have a listing that's early into its phase or into its existence. But if we have a listing that's been on the market for half a year, we're not getting that call. Here's your offer.
Right.
You know,
we're not really concerned about what's important to you.
Yeah, this is what's important to the buyer. So do know that if you're a seller, the sooner you get an offer, the buyer's probably thinking along that. Yeah. And then the further down you go, you might lose some of the other important aspects of the contract.
It's that whole thing, as a buyer, getting the seller to believe that first offer is going to be their best offer, and going after those hot buttons, going after what's most important to them. Is it time? Is it money? Or these other factors, et cetera, is so smart as you're putting that seller hat on and trying to figure out, how do I make sure that we get the right answer to that age-old question, is your first offer the best offer? So hopefully that's helpful. A lot of moving parts in that.
Yeah.
But as always, it's a fun topic. We appreciate your time today. As always, thanks for following us on YouTube, and we'll talk to you all soon.